A man was on a plane wanting some water, only to notice his fingernails rapidly darkening. As a doctor, Jack instantly recognized this was caused by severe cardiopulmonary hypoxia before he could devise a solution. The bottle in his hand began to twist and deform quickly, and the water glass on the table started shaking violently. At that moment, the flight attendants also sensed something was wrong. They quickly sat down in their seats and urged the passengers to fasten their seatbelts. But it was already too late. The plane had entered a turbulent zone. The water in the glass suddenly floated up, and passengers without seatbelts were sucked into the air by the strong currents due to decompression. The entire cabin began to shake violently. The passengers were terrified by the sight, clutching the armrests tightly for survival, silently praying for safety. Meanwhile, the captain also realized the crisis. He quickly put on his oxygen mask, and the passengers followed suit. Jack's wife fainted from suffocation, but unbeknownst to everyone, a young girl was trapped in the lavatory. She couldn't open the door due to the severe turbulence and eventually passed out on the floor from oxygen deprivation. To save his wife, Jack found an emergency oxygen bottle in the supply room and quickly placed it on her, snatching her back from the brink of death. To everyone's astonishment, after a violent jolt, the cabin pressure miraculously returned to normal. Flight 7500 had finally survived the ordeal. To reassure the passengers, the captain immediately addressed the cabin. It turned out the plane had hit a storm while passing through the turbulence, causing cabin pressure issues, but they had performed emergency procedures. Only then did the passengers finally breathe a sigh of relief. The girl who had collapsed in the lavatory was also found to have regained consciousness. They thought the disaster was finally over. But strange things soon started happening on the plane. First, a middle-aged man suddenly felt unable to breathe. Jack, the doctor, rushed over to help. But the man's condition was worsening. He kept digging his fingers into his mouth before anyone could figure out what he was doing. The man suddenly spat out a stream of blood. Immediately afterward, his entire body began to contort in a terrifying manner, convulsing like a zombie. But soon, all movement ceased. It wasn't until they laid him on the floor that Jack realized he had stopped breathing because someone had died inexplicably on the plane. The captain immediately reported the incident to the ground tower, asking the airport to identify the deceased passenger. Since they were still an hour away from their destination, the crew had to move the body and cover it with a blanket. However, the terrifying events were far from over.